The transport ship's engines hummed to a stop as Dr. Cade Thorne stepped onto the docking platform of Xerion Station. The metallic taste of recycled air filled his lungs, mixed with something distinctly alien. Ozone, and what the briefings had described as crystalline dust from the planet's unique mineral deposits. Through the observation deck's reinforced windows, he could see the scarred surface of Xerion below, its once pristine cities now bearing the wounds of a 5-year conflict that had only recently ended. Cade adjusted the strap of his medical bag, feeling the weight of the advanced rehabilitation equipment inside. At 34, he'd seen enough broken bodies and shattered spirits during his time as a combat medic to know that healing often required more than technology. It demanded hope. That's what had brought him here, light years from Earth, as part of the Interspecies Medical Exchange Program. Dr. Thorne? A tall Zerathi official approached, her blue-tinted skin bearing the ritual scarification that marked her as a member of the diplomatic caste. I am Ambassador Vexhai. Welcome to Xerion. Thank you, Ambassador. I'm eager to begin work with your wounded warriors. Vexhai's expression grew somber. There is one case in particular we hope you can help with, though I must warn you, others have tried and failed. Zephyr Voss was once our most decorated battle commander. Now. She paused, searching for words. She is diminished. As they traveled through the station's corridors, Vexhai explained Zephyr's history. Once a legend among the Zerathi military, she had led the charge in the Battle of Crimson Ridge, a desperate last stand that had saved thousands of civilian lives. But an enemy plasma mine had shattered her spine, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. For 5 years she had lived in isolation, refusing most visitors and growing increasingly bitter. She has agreed to see you, Vexhai said as they approached a residential wing, though I suspect it is only to tell you to leave. The door to Zephyr's quarters slid open with a soft hiss. The room was spartanly furnished, with weapons and military commendations displayed on the walls, relics of a life that seemed frozen in time. In the center sat Zephyr herself, her powerful shoulders and arms a testament to her warrior heritage, but her legs motionless beneath a simple blanket. She was beautiful in a fierce, intimidating way. Her silver-white hair was cropped short in military fashion, and her violet eyes held a sharpness that could cut through steel. But there was something else there, too. A deep weariness that spoke of years of pain. So, she said without preamble, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command, you're the human who thinks he can work miracles. Cade stepped forward, not intimidated by her hostile tone. I'm the human who thinks you deserve better than giving up. Zephyr's laugh was bitter. Better? Look around you, human. This is all I am now. A museum piece? A cautionary tale. She gestured to her useless legs. Your people have many wonderful technologies, but they cannot rebuild what was completely destroyed. Maybe not, Cade said, setting down his bag and pulling up a chair to sit at her eye level. But I've seen people recover from injuries that seemed impossible to heal. The neural pathways in your spine were severed 5 years ago, she interrupted. I've had your scans, your tests, your false hopes. 3 different specialists have told me the same thing. I am broken, Dr. Thorne. Accept it as I have. Cade studied her face, seeing past the anger to the pain beneath. You know what I see when I look at you. Pity? Potential. He leaned forward slightly. I see someone who's been fighting a war against despair for 5 years. That takes incredible strength. The question is, are you ready to fight a different kind of battle? For a moment something flickered in Zephyr's eyes, surprise perhaps, or the faintest echo of hope, but it was quickly replaced by her familiar mask of indifference. You can show yourself out, Doctor. Thank you for the visit, but I'm not interested in being your next project. Cade stood slowly, but instead of leaving, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small device. This is a neural activity monitor. It can detect even the slightest electrical impulses in damaged tissue. He placed it on the table beside her. I'm not asking you to believe in miracles, Zephyr. I'm asking you to let me prove that you're not as broken as you think you are. As he walked toward the door, he paused. I'll be back tomorrow. Same time. Whether you use that device or not is your choice, but I'll be here either way." The door closed behind him with a soft whisper, leaving Zefia alone with the small device, and the echo of words that had stirred something she thought had died long ago, the possibility that her story wasn't over yet. True to his word, Cade returned the following day. This time he brought a portable medical scanner and what looked like a metallic briefcase. Zefia sat in the same position, but he noticed the neural monitor was no longer on the table. It sat beside her chair, its small display showing faint but unmistakable readings. "You used it," he said simply. "Curiosity," she replied curtly. "Nothing more." Cade smiled as he set up his equipment. Curiosity is how every great discovery begins. He opened the briefcase, revealing an array of thin electrodes and a compact computer interface. These are microstimulators. They can send targeted electrical impulses to specific nerve clusters. "More false hopes, Doctor? Call me Cade. And no, facts. Your neural monitor showed activity in sectors the previous doctors claimed were dead. That means there are pathways we can potentially reactivate." For the next hour, Cade worked with methodical precision, placing electrodes along Zefia's spine and legs. She endured his touch with stoic silence, though he noticed her jaw tighten whenever his fingers brushed against seemingly lifeless skin. "Tell me about the battle," he said as he calibrated the equipment. "Crimson Ridge. Why?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended, because understanding trauma helps with healing, physical and otherwise. Zefia was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began to speak. "We were outnumbered 10-1. The evacuation ships couldn't launch while the enemy held the ridge. Someone had to buy them time." Her hands clenched into fists. "I led the charge, because that's what commanders do. We held them off long enough for 8,000 civilians to escape. And the mine? I saw it too late. The blast threw me 50 meters. When I woke up 3 days later, they told me I was a hero. Heroes aren't supposed to..." She gestured helplessly at her legs. Cade activated the first sequence of microstimulations. Heroes come in many forms. Sometimes the greatest heroism is surviving when everything inside you wants to quit. Suddenly, Zefia gasped. Her right foot had twitched, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. "Did you see?" she started. "I saw." Cade's voice was calm, professional, but his eyes sparkled with excitement. "The pathway from L4 to your anterior tibialis is still partially intact." For the first time since he'd met her, Zefia's mask slipped completely. Tears ran down her cheeks as she stared at her foot, willing it to move again. "I felt it. Just for a second, but I felt it." Cade handed her a tissue, careful not to make the gesture seem patronizing. "This is just the beginning, Zefia, but I need you to understand recovery won't be linear. There will be setbacks, frustration, days when you want to give up." "I've been giving up for 5 years," she said, wiping her eyes. "Maybe it's time to try something else." Over the following weeks, Cade visited daily. Each session brought small victories and crushing disappointments in equal measure. Some days, Zefia could generate voluntary muscle contractions in her thighs. Other days, nothing worked at all. During one particularly difficult session, after hours of failed attempts to recreate the previous day's progress, Zefia finally exploded. "This is pointless." She swept the neural monitor off the table, sending it clattering across the floor. "You're torturing me with hope, making me believe in something that will never happen." Cade calmly retrieved the device, checking it for damage. "You're right, this is torture. Recovery always is. Then why do you keep coming back? Why do you care what happens to some broken alien warrior?" Cade set down the monitor and met her gaze directly. "Because 3 years ago I was in a field. Hospital on Europa Station when a plasma mortar took out half the building. Piece of shrapnel went through my chest, missed my heart by centimeters." He unbuttoned his shirt, revealing a jagged scar across his sternum. "The doctor said I'd never work in the field again. Said the trauma would be too much." Zefia stared at the scar, then at his face. "But you recovered." Physically, yes. But for months I couldn't sleep, couldn't operate without my hands shaking. I wanted to quit medicine entirely. He rebuttoned his shirt. An old army medic named Santos refused to let me. He'd sit with me for hours, making me practice sutures on fruit until my hands were steady again. He said something I'll never forget. Healing isn't about becoming who you were before. It's about becoming who you're meant to be after. And, who am I meant to be? The question was barely a whisper. I don't know yet, but I know you're not meant to be defeated. That night, long after Cade had left, Zefia sat alone in her quarters, staring at the neural monitor. For the first time, in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond these four walls. The possibility terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She picked up the device and pressed it against her thigh, watching the readouts dance across the screen. Somewhere beneath her skin, beneath the scar tissue and damaged nerves, something was still fighting, just like her. Perhaps it was time to fight back. 6 weeks into treatment, Zefia's quarters had been transformed into a makeshift rehabilitation center. Advanced human medical equipment shared space with traditional Zarathi healing crystals, a fusion that somehow seemed fitting for their unusual partnership. Cade arrived earlier than usual, carrying a device Zefia had never seen before. It looked like a metallic framework designed to fit around her legs and torso. "What is that contraption?" she asked, eyeing it suspiciously. "An exoskeleton prototype. It responds to neural impulses and provides mechanical support." He began assembling it with practiced efficiency. "The idea is to retrain your brain to send signals to your legs, even if the signals can't get through normally. You want me to be part machine? I want you to walk." His words were simple, direct, and they hit her like a physical blow. Zefia had grown accustomed to Cade's presence over the past weeks. She looked forward to his visits, found herself thinking about their conversations long after he left. Somewhere along the way, the human doctor had become important to her, more important than she cared to admit. "The exoskeleton requires skin contact to read neural patterns," Cade explained, his professional demeanor not quite masking something deeper in his eyes. "I'll need to help you with the fitting." For a moment, neither of them moved. The air in the room seemed charged with possibilities that went far beyond medical treatment. "All right," Zefia said quietly. Cade's hands were gentle but sure as he helped her into the device. Each touch sent electricity through her skin that had nothing to do with the medical equipment. When his fingers brushed against her thigh while adjusting a sensor, she drew in a sharp breath. "Did that hurt?" he asked, concerned. "No," she whispered. "The opposite." Their eyes met and held. In that moment, the careful professional distance they'd maintained crumbled. Cade's hand lingered on her leg, and she could feel the warmth of his touch through the thin fabric. "Zefia, I know," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "I feel it too." The kiss that followed was tentative at first, then deeper as weeks of suppressed emotion poured out between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This complicates things," Cade said, though he made no move to pull away. "Everything about this situation is complicated." Zefia's violet eyes sparkled with something that hadn't been there before. Hope, desire, life. "But I'm tired of being afraid of complications." They spent the next hour working with the exoskeleton, but the dynamic between them had fundamentally shifted. Where before there had been doctor and patient, now there were two people who cared deeply for each other, fighting together against the limitations that sought to define them. "Think about standing," Cade instructed as he calibrated the device. "Imagine pushing yourself up from the chair." Zefia closed her eyes, focusing on the memory of standing, of the feeling of her legs supporting her weight. The exoskeleton hummed softly, responding to the neural patterns it detected. Slowly, incredibly, she began to rise. The mechanical supports did most of the work, but Zefia could feel her own muscles engaging, trying to help. For the first time, in 5 years, she looked down at Cade from a standing position. Tears streamed down both their faces. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like coming back to life." That evening they sat together on Zephyr's small balcony, watching Xerion's twin moons rise over the scarred landscape. The exoskeleton had been set aside, but its promise lingered between them. "What happens when you're reassigned?" Zephyr asked, her head resting on Cade's shoulder. "I don't know. The program is supposed to last 6 months. And then you return to Earth." That was the plan. He turned to face her fully. "But plans change. People change. These weeks with you have changed me, Zephyr. I came here thinking I was going to heal you, but you've healed something in me I didn't even know was broken." She kissed him again, soft and lingering. "Promise me something. Anything. Promise me that whatever happens, we won't let fear make our decisions. We've both been ruled by fear for too long." "I promise," he whispered against her lips. Above them, the stars wheeled in patterns that neither of their species had names for, but somehow in that moment the universe felt perfectly aligned. They had found each other across the vast darkness of space, and together, they were learning that the greatest healings happened not in the body, but in the heart. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new sessions with the exoskeleton, new steps toward an uncertain future. But tonight they simply held each other under alien stars, two souls who had refused to surrender to the darkness. 3 months into their work together, Zephyr had progressed beyond anyone's expectations, including her own. She could stand unassisted for short periods and take halting steps with the exoskeleton's support. But more than her physical improvement, it was the transformation in her spirit that amazed those around her. "The Council is concerned," Ambassador Vexai informed Cade during one of their weekly progress meetings. "Some members believe that Zephyr's attachment to you compromises the integrity of the medical program." Cade set down his datapad, his jaw tightening. "Her progress speaks for itself. She's exceeded every benchmark we set. No one questions your medical skill, Dr. Thorne, but there are those who view your relationship as inappropriate. They're calling for your reassignment." "And what do you think, Ambassador?" Vexai was quiet for a long moment. "I think Zephyr Voss is more alive now than she's been in 5 years. I think whatever is happening between you two is helping her heal. But I also think you both need to be prepared for opposition." That evening, Cade found Zephyr in the station's observation lounge, standing at the great window that looked out over Xerion's surface. She was using her walking frame, a lighter alternative to the full exoskeleton, and she turned as he approached. "You heard about the council meeting," she said. "It wasn't a question. Political pressure was inevitable. We knew this day would come." Zephyr moved closer to him, her steps careful, but determined. "They want to separate us. Send you back to Earth. They can try." Cade's voice was fierce. "But I'm not leaving you. Not now. Not when we're so close to a breakthrough." "Cade." She reached up to cup his face. "Look at me. Really look at me." He did, seeing the strong woman she'd become. No longer the broken warrior he'd first met, but someone who had fought her way back from the edge of despair. "I'm not the same person I was when you arrived," she continued. "Win or lose, succeed or fail, you've already given me the greatest gift possible. You gave me back myself. Don't talk like this is goodbye. I'm not. I'm talking like someone who's finally ready to fight for what she wants." Her eyes blazed with determination. "But I need to know you're ready to fight too, because they're going to try to use our relationship to discredit everything we've accomplished." Over the next few days, the political pressure intensified. Conservative council members questioned whether Zephyr's improvement was genuine or merely psychological manipulation. Others suggested that her growing independence was actually dangerous, that she might attempt actions beyond her capabilities and injure herself further. The controversy came to a head during what was supposed to be a routine demonstration of Zephyr's progress. The Council's Medical Review Board, along with representatives from both human and Zerathi governments, gathered in the station's main conference room. Commander Voss, the board chairman began, we understand you've shown some improvement under Dr. Thorne's care. However, there are concerns about the methods employed and whether your progress is sustainable without emotional dependencies. Xephia, seated in her mobility chair but wearing the lightweight exoskeleton supports, met his gaze steadily. You want to know if I can function without Dr. Thorne's presence? That would be one way to put it. Very well. She activated the exoskeleton and began to rise. Cade, please leave the room. Xephia, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Her voice carried the authority of the commander she'd once been. Please. Reluctantly, Cade stepped outside. Through the conference room's transparent walls, he watched as Xephia stood, took a few steadying breaths, and then began to walk. Her movements were careful, deliberate, but unmistakably her own. She walked the length of the conference table, turned and walked back. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she reached down and deactivated the exoskeleton's power. For a moment, she swayed dangerously. Several board members started forward, but she held up a hand to stop them. Drawing on reserves of strength that came from somewhere deeper than muscle and bone, she took 3 unassisted steps. The room fell silent except for the soft sound of her breathing. My progress, she said, her voice strong despite the tremendous effort, is not dependent on Dr. Thorne's presence. It's dependent on the hope he helped me find. The hope that I am more than my limitations, more than my injuries, more than the sum of what I've lost. She reactivated the exoskeleton and slowly sat back down. But her eyes never left the board chairman's face. You ask if my relationship with Dr. Thorne compromises this program? I tell you that love, real love, doesn't make us weaker. It makes us brave enough to attempt the impossible. Later that evening, as Cade held her while she recovered from the day's exertions, Xephia smiled against his chest. So, she said, think they'll let you stay? After that performance? I think they'd be crazy to try to separate us. Good, she murmured, because I have plans for us, Dr. Thorne. Big plans. Such as learning to dance. I figure if I can walk, I should probably learn to dance too. Cade laughed, the sound rich with joy and possibility. I'd be honored to be your partner. Outside, their window, Xerion's moons cast silver light across the healing planet, and 2 hearts beat in rhythm with the promise of tomorrow. 6 months after Cade's arrival on Xerion, the day everyone had been working toward finally came. The great assembly hall, rebuilt from the war's ruins, was filled with representatives from dozens of worlds. Today marked not just the official conclusion of the interspecies medical exchange program, but something far more significant. A demonstration that healing could transcend species, politics, and the limitations that divide us. Backstage, Xephia stood before a mirror, adjusting the ceremonial uniform she hadn't worn in 5 years. The deep blue fabric bore the silver insignia of her rank, but she'd made one modification, a small human medical caduceus pin beside her Zerathi decorations. Nervous? Cade asked, entering the preparation room. Terrified, she admitted. It's been so long since I've been in front of this many people, and never under circumstances like these. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Xephia. You've already accomplished the impossible. She turned to face him, and for a moment, he was struck breathless by her transformation. This wasn't the broken woman he'd met 6 months ago, nor was she exactly the warrior she'd been before her injury. She was something new, someone who had been forged stronger in the fire of adversity. I'm not doing this for them, she said, reaching for his hand. I'm doing this for everyone who's been told they're finished, that their story is over. I'm doing this for us. Ambassador Vex High appeared in the doorway. It's time. The assembly hall fell silent as Xephia entered from the side entrance. She moved slowly but steadily, using only a simple walking stick for support. The exoskeleton had been set aside weeks ago. This moment belonged to her alone. At the center of the hall, a podium waited. The distance from the entrance to the stage was perhaps 50 meters, but Xephia knew that each step represented something larger. With every footfall, she was walking not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been told their dreams were over. Cade watched from the side of the hall, his heart swelling with pride and love. Beside him stood Dr. Santos, his old mentor, who had flown from Earth specifically for this moment. "That's quite a woman you've found, son," Santos whispered. "She found me," Cade replied softly. Halfway to the podium, Zephyr paused. For a terrifying moment, Cade thought she might fall, but instead, she straightened her shoulders and continued forward with renewed determination. When she finally reached the podium, the silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then, someone in the audience, a young Zerathi soldier in a mobility chair, began to applaud. The sound spread through the hall like wildfire until every person present was on their feet, cheering for the woman who had refused to stay down. 6 months ago, Zephyr began when the applause finally died down. I believed my story was over. I had defined myself by what I had lost rather than what remained. Dr. Cade Thorne. She looked directly at him, her love shining clearly in her eyes. Taught me that healing isn't about returning to who we were before. It's about discovering who we can become after. She spoke for 10 minutes about the partnership between their species, about the power of hope, and about the courage required to believe in impossible things. But when she concluded, she had one final surprise. The medical techniques Dr. Thorne and I have pioneered together will be made freely available to both our peoples. But more than that, we announced today the establishment of the Interspecies Rehabilitation Institute, here on Xerion, a place where healing will know no boundaries of species, politics, or prejudice. The crowd erupted again, but Zephyr held up her hand for silence. And finally, I have a personal announcement. She set aside her walking stick and stood unsupported. Dr. Thorne, would you join me? Confused but trusting, Cade made his way to the stage. When he reached her side, Zephyr took his hands in hers. For 5 years I lived in darkness, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. You brought me light. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. You loved me when I couldn't love myself. She sank down on one knee, a movement that 6 months ago would have been impossible. Cade Thorne, will you marry me? The hall went completely silent. Interspecies relationships were accepted, even celebrated, but marriage was still rare. This was unprecedented. Cade stared down at the woman who had become his entire world, his heart so full he thought it might burst. Yes, he said simply. Yes to everything, to marriage, to the Institute, to whatever future we build together. As he helped her stand, the assembly hall exploded in celebration. Delegates from dozens of worlds rose to their feet, cheering for a love that had transcended every barrier placed before it. Later that evening, at the reception celebrating both the program's success and their engagement, Cade and Zephyr stood, together on the observation deck looking out over Xerion's healing landscape. So, Zephyr said, leaning against him, what do you think happens next? I think we help others stand up just like you did. I think we prove that love really can heal anything. And I think, he turned to face her fully, that our greatest adventures are still ahead of us. Together, always together. As they kissed under the alien stars, neither could have predicted the journey that had brought them to this moment. A warrior who had fallen, and a healer who had lifted her up. Two people from different worlds who had found in each other the strength to rise above any limitation. In the years that followed, the institute they founded would help thousands of people from dozens of species reclaim their lives. Their love story would become legend, told wherever people needed reminding that no matter how far we fall, we can always choose to stand again. But on this night, under the twin moons of Xerion, they were simply two people who had refused to give up on each other, dancing slowly to music only they could hear, writing with every step the beginning of their next chapter.